بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فَلَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Salawat. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, as you all know, we are commemorating the majlis of demise of a very outstanding personality of Islamic history and Islamic community, Ummul Mu'mineen, Hadrat Khadijatul Kubra Salamullah Alayha. And when we commemorate the life and the death of this great lady of Islam, we always acknowledge her generosity and her sacrifices, her great spirit and services for the spread of Islam and for the establishment of Islam. We all know that the first convert to Islam was actually this great lady, because according to the Shi'i beliefs, we don't believe that Amirul Mu'mineen as a child was, for example, a convert to Islam. To us, Amirul Mu'mineen was a born Muslim, a born Mu'min. He was Kulle Iman. He was Imam and Ma'asum, and Imam is born as Imam. So he was not a convert. Then there are two people that who remain in the list of three. If you look at the records of history, normally the Muslim historians gave three names as first converts. They say among the ladies, among the men, and among the children. While they don't make these separate categories when they reach to other narrations of the history or other facts. Actually, they want to bring a gentleman actually in this way in the list of first Muslims. And they have to create these three columns or these three categories. Among the men and among the women and among the children. So among the children, Amirul Mu'mineen, we don't believe that he was a convert. He was a born Muslim. Then remain the two people, one man and one woman. If the parents of those children who are playing in that area, if they can take care of their children, so I don't think that our volunteers will be enough to really go and babysit all these young kids. If the parents bring these kids, they need to take care of them. Recite a salawat. So one man and one woman. And if you read the history, you see that when Prophet received that first revelation, all the books tell that Prophet directly came to home. And when he broke the news that I received the revelation today, and this is how Jibreel came and this is how he said to me, so the first person to whom Prophet spoke, according to the Shia and Sunni history, that was Ummul Mu'mineen Khadijatul Kubra Salamullah Alaiha. And she was the one that who agreed to the Prophet, who gave the advice to the Prophet, and who actually believed in this new message and this new revelation. So we don't have to go that far that there was somebody with Hazrat Khadija. Hazrat Khadija is the first convert, and that credit goes to the woman. Those who think that women in Islam are second class citizens and they are behind, actually they took lead in accepting Islam. The first convert to Islam is a woman. Then come the men that who converted to Islam. But the person that who believed in Islam and became the first convert, that was a lady, and that credit goes to the woman. And it was not only this much that she believed and she converted. Actually, she sponsored the spread of Islam and Islamic work and Islamic activities, because she was a very resourceful lady, she was affluent lady, she was a business lady, and she was doing very well economically. She was well off than many of the men in Makkah. She was one of the leading business individuals. And the reason that, first of all, her father was businessman. She had got some assets and some inheritance from the father's side. And then, as history says, that she had married a man who was a businessman, but he died and she inherited the assets from the husband. And as the history says, that she married again to another man who was also a businessman, well to do, and he also died soon after the marriage, and she got even some more portion of inheritance and assets from this husband. And then she was not the only widow that who got the inheritance and assets from the deceased husband. This was common in the society, and there were many other widows also who got the assets and money from their portion of inheritance from their deceased father or husband. But Khadija was a very talented lady. She was very gifted, very outstanding. She actually took over on the businesses left by the husbands, and then she managed those businesses so skillfully and successfully that she became one of the most successful and affluent business people in the whole area. So it shows the personality of this lady. It shows that this lady had skills, had talents, and was extraordinary lady, an executive lady, and that makes her very much different and distinguished from all those ladies who came later in the life of Prophet. And now Muslim community thinks that those are the more important ladies and those are the more important kind of figures in the life of Prophet, while if you compare them with the skills, with the talents, with the different dimensions of the lives of this lady, the wife of Prophet, actually there is no comparison. Those were totally depending on the Prophet, and housewives, and they had no other skills and they had no other background of any sort. History doesn't tell us anything. So that is why when later on at a time when one of those wives of Prophet wanted to argue with the Prophet, and she was annoyed when Prophet was talking about Hazrat Khadija and he was praising Hazrat Khadija, and she said that you got better than her and still you remember that old woman. Allah has given you now much young, much beautiful and much better wife, and still you remember that elderly woman. Prophet, that who was known for controlling his anger, very polite, very mild, Rajul, that who was innaka la ala khuluqin azim, who never raised his voice, but Prophet couldn't take it. And Shia Sunni histories both tell us that Prophet said that this comment is not justified. How do you say that Allah has given me somebody better than Khadija? She was the one that who joined me when everybody was denying me. She was the one who supported me when I had not a penny in my pocket. She was the one that who gave all those sacrifices and gave everything what she had to fund the Islamic activity and Islamic movement, and suffered with me through all those boycotts and embargoes, Shaykh Abi Talib 3 years, and all those tough and difficult times, while you guys came when everything was all established and everything was fine, and I was already the head of the community and head of the society and accepted messenger and Rasul. How do you compare yourself with Khadija? So my brothers and sisters, this lady was it's a totally different class. Not just because of her wealth, but for a wealthy lady who has earned all that wealth by difficult way, then giving all that to the husband to spend in that movement. That is a difficult decision. Hard earned money, and particularly the business community, which knows the real value of the money. Their money doesn't come easy, and they know the value of money and they make money out of money. So when you see a businessman or a businesswoman giving their money, it is different than giving money of some other segments of society. And then a lady, and she gives up everything what she had, and then she never blessed the Prophet. She never made the claims. She never came back and wanted to kind of give the blessings to the Prophet. And then the lady who always lived comfortable life, she ended up living a very hard and difficult life. Many of us, if we had some tough and difficult days in our early age, and later on we managed to have some financial success and we became affluent and wealthy, we forget over those difficult days and difficult times. When we get into the comfort, we don't remember that we had some tough and difficult days in our life also. But otherwise is very difficult. If you have been wealthy and if you have been affluent and if you have the life of comfort and convenience, and then you end up into tough and difficult life and the harsh life, every moment of your life becomes bitter and difficult. And you remember always that you have been always doing great, things were so good with you, you had this kind of home, this kind of lifestyle, you had all these things at your disposal, you were used to have servants and slaves and you had all the conveniences and comfort, and now I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this. So every day, at every moment, you remember your past. You don't remember your past when you become rich from the poor. But when you become poor after being rich, every moment is bitter and difficult. And that was the life of Hazrat Khadijatul Kubra, a lady that who was known as Malikatul Arab, the princess or the queen of Arabia. And then she is now eating grass and the leaves of the tree in Shayb Abi Talib, and doesn't have milk in her body to provide to her that little daughter on lap, Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alaiha, who is only 3 years old or 2 years old or even younger. And she cannot even take care of that little baby. A mother, when she faces that kind of situation that now her own child is suffering on her lap, she even is ready to fight with the husband. She can take only so much. But when her children suffer in front of her, she loses the respect of husband. And she is ready to fight the husband. Enough is enough. I suffered, but I don't want to see my children suffer at your hand or because of you. The greatness of the ladies of Ahlul Bayt is this, that they suffered and they saw their children suffering on their laps, whether it is Shayb Abi Talib, whether it is Medina, whether it is Karbala. And these ladies never brought a single complaint on their lips. Khadijatul Kubra is seeing Fatima Zahra suffering on her lap, but she is still committed. Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alaiha saw suffering of her children, Zainab, Kulsum, Hassan, Hussain, and then Mohsin. But she is still committed. She is not finding a different way than the husband or than the father. And then what? Layla, Rubab, Farwa, these ladies at Karbala, and they saw their little children suffering and their youth suffering. They didn't come with the complaint to Imam Hussain. They were all committed. So my brothers and sisters, when we remember these ladies, when we remember these great figures of Islam, it gives us a new energy. It gives us new reasons to increase our commitment and our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the Prophet and to the cause. So this lady, al-Mu'mineen, is an exceptional lady in Islamic history. And no one else other than her own daughter, who is Sayyidatun Nisa'il Alameen, Fatimatul Zahra Salamullah Alayha, has any more merits in their life. She stood next to the Prophet from the day one, from the day first, and she gave him the emotional support, because husbands need, particularly these husbands that who are involved in the community matters, who are involved in the community building, who are involved in the community activities, they need more in emotional support, and they need more understanding on behalf of their wives than anything else. Because if their wives are not understanding that what their husband is going through and what is his role in the community, and what are expectations of community from him, and how he has to take care of that, and if they become totally mindless of all those duties and responsibilities and claim all the husband only for themselves, then these husbands, they cannot really do anything and they cannot make any success outside. This is understanding of wife which gives room to the husband to maneuver, and he makes then success. Then he goes out with full confidence that he has a strong supporting wife on the back. That's why even in English what they say, that behind every successful man there is a woman. It's a universal truth. But if she is not understanding, if she is not sacrificing, if she is not sharing her husband with the community, and if she is going to say, you are only for me and my children, and that's it, then this husband is going to be a domestic pet. And he cannot really go and do anything for the community or for the society at large. Yes, he may be money machine. For 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours he can make money. But other than that, he is a domestic pet. But if he has a supporting wife, if he has a wife who understands the potential of the husband and the talents of husband and his role in the community, his role in the society, and then she supports and she understands, then all what this husband does, she is partner in sawab. She is partner in sawab, because she was the one that who allowed him to go out and do all that. So while Khadija is sitting at home, but she is shareek in each and everything what Muhammad Mustafa is doing outside in the masjid. Yes, these ladies were not involved in each and every activity outside. It's a different topic. I will not get into it particularly. Nights are short and tomorrow again you have to get up for Sahri, and I don't want to really extend the majlis too much. But this is very important point. In modern civilization, the trend is that women have to go out and they have to do every nitty-gritty by themselves, as the men are doing. And always Islam is under attack. Why Islam doesn't allow women to go out and do this? Why Islam doesn't allow women to go out and do this? And why Islam doesn't allow women to go out and do this? While Islam's culture and the way was that Islam had a system. Islam wanted to have people like when you play football, if you are 11, in these days the FIFA is going on, so it's the example of football is going to what you guys call soccer, I believe. Yeah, but the issue is that you have the 11 players playing there, but you don't have all these 11 players all standing in one line in the D of the other side. You have those 3 or 4 guys, one guy standing in your goal. Nobody says why this goalkeeper is not allowed to go out and make the goal in the other goal. Nobody asks that foolish question. Everybody runs and this goalkeeper is stuck there in the goal. This goalkeeper has a duty to protect this goal. And this goalkeeper, of course, is not going to leave this place because this is his role in the team. Then there are defenders. There is a line of defenders and this is their job. You cannot say why they are not allowed to leave this line. And then there are forward and there are people that who are attackers. So there is always a plan. Islam had a plan. And the plan was that if these ladies, they come on the back of their husbands, if first of all they become the strongest supporters and allies of their husbands. There is a hadith I should quote here, this is the right place. People came one of those wars in jihad and they asked, Ya Rasulullah, are women allowed to go to jihad? You are recruiting the people, so are women allowed to come and register and go for jihad? Prophet said, Jihadul mar'ah husnut taba'ul. Ba'al in Arabic is husband. Husnut taba'ul, yani the jihad of women is actually to take care excellently of their husband. That is their jihad. They don't have to go and fight in Uhud or Badr. Yes, we will need a few nurses here and there who can come and help us and give us a hand. And Prophet was used to take some women with him for incapacity of nurses or providing the water or those kind of small activities. But it is jihadul mar'ati husnut taba'ul. Because if she is going to take care of the husband, and if the husband is taken care of, then I need this husband to come and fight. And if the husband is sure that my wife is going to be loyal with me even if I am 6 months away, if he is convinced that this woman is going to take care of my children properly even if I am 4 months away, if the husband is sure that my wife is not going to ruin my assets and my belongings and she will take care of my household and my children and everything properly at home, then this mujahid will not have any cowardness or any concerns when he is away from home and he is on the front lines. And then her duty is to raise those mujahid children. You need those mujahid, young youth mujahideen. Who is going to raise those mujahideen? These are mothers that who raise those mujahid children, mujahid youth. And then all the support and all the support which comes from the home, from the family. So my point is that let me give you this example. As I said, if Khadija was sitting at home, but whatever her husband Rasulullah did, whether he sat on the mimbar, whether he stood in mihrab, whether he went out and teaching, whatever he was doing, Khadija was shareek in sawab. You cannot say, oh Prophet, the man is having the sawab, this poor lady is sitting, she doesn't have sawab. She is deprived of sawab. No, she is shareek in sawab. Because she is the one who is allowing him to go out and peacefully do all this what he is doing. And do you think that When Imam Ali went in the Khaybar and Khandak and Uhud and Badr and did all those wars and fights and did all that, the sawab was only for Ali, and Fatima is not sharik in that sawab. It is not only Ali who is Fatih Khaybar, it is Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha equally with him when he is Fatih Khaybar. We just don't give the credit. We don't look properly at that. It is not only Ali who is holding Zulfiqar. It is Fatima's invisible hand with the hand of Ali which is holding Zulfiqar. And when Ali would come home, she was the one that who was embracing him and who was washing his body and who was doing all the nursing and all. Imam Ali would be wounded and bleeding. And this lady would wash the wounds, she would do all the nursing, bandages, and then she would take care of all the household work when he was away. While normally the work was divided between Ali and Fatima at home. At the house of Ali, the work was divided. Imam Ali was used to do his job for the home and Fatima was used to do her job. But when Ali was away, who was doing all the job or the job of even Ali? It was Fatima. So my brothers and sisters, this is how these ladies, even if they were sitting at home, but they were present in the battlefields, they were present in the masajid, they were present in khutbahs, they were present in sermons, they were present in travels, they were present in every activity, but indirectly. Indirectly. And from the time this modern civilization said that no, everybody has to do this job directly, and now what is happening in our modern societies, everybody knows. When children are raised by the TV, and by the babysittings and by all those electronics and the devices, and nobody is around them and nobody is taking care of them and they are all eating the frozen food, then they are talking about green and healthy and organic. No, going from frozen to directly to the organic. These are the human extremes. This is how human behavior is. One time on one extreme, the other time on the other. Islam teaches that balance. Islam says that things need to be in balance and there is a plan in life. And if the house, the 6 people are living or 4 people, it is a team. And everyone has a role and everyone has a duty. And if they work in a plan and if they delegate jobs to each other and work in organization, the results are much better and very balanced reasons. Hazrat Khadijatul Kubra Salamullah alayha, being a woman, and this itself, I don't have to know here make a clause and say that I am not against for women going in business, because I am giving the example of Hazrat Khadijatul Kubra as a business lady. So nobody should understand wrong. Maulana Faizi is a man from the ancient times and he is saying that women are not supposed to go and do business or women are not supposed to go and work. If you are superwoman and if you can take care of your husband and your children and then still you have time and you can go out and you can work and you can earn and you can do business and you can be executive lady, good for you. Nobody is against that. And in certain areas we do need women because life has changed. Today it's a different life. And if community needs, if society needs our women to be present in certain sectors, in certain areas, and if it is the need of the time and you have the talent and you have the gift and you have the ability that you can go out and serve the society, serve the community, you can make difference without compromising on your Islamic identity and Islamic ethics and Islamic principles and Islamic laws. Don't come back and say, oh, because I am working, so I cannot practice Islam here. Then no Hakim has told you to go and work. You are working there because you are not going to compromise on your Islamic principles. You are not going to compromise on your Islamic identity. Then you are allowed to go and work. And you are perfectly, you can go and work. Islam is not against work. Islam is not against business. But be a Muslim woman, be a Muslim businesswoman, be a Muslim stateswoman and proud Muslim. Then even if you fail in winning some people, but at least you are successful in winning the angels and Anbiya and A'imma and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At least Allah is watching. The prophets are watching, A'imma are watching, Imam of your age is watching that you are going through difficulties because of his commands. He will come and support you. He will be there. So the issue is, although I didn't need to explain that, but some people are new here and they don't know my stance. It is month of Ramadan and we get some people that who come only during the Ramadan. Otherwise, everybody knows that I am not against education, I am not against work, and I am not against the business for women. Women can go as high as they want for education. I am in support. They can work outside if they find appropriate job and if they can maintain their other responsibilities, and if they don't compromise when they are there on their Islamic identity and their Islamic principles, then they can go out and work, and they can be in every sector and in every area. And from where do we get that? We get from Hazrat Khadijatul Kubra. We get from Hazrat Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alayha, who did go out and did work out according to the works of that time and that society. So this lady is a great inspiration, my brothers and sisters, for us. And one beauty of the Shia faith is this, that our perspective of women and the perspective of women of these other Islamic schools of thought is very different. You see the Talibani version of women, Al-Qaeda version of women, the Sunni Wahhabi version of woman. It's not a woman, it is a tent. You know that. They have made that woman as a tent. Or totally deprived of education. Even in this day and age, they quote those Da'if ahadith that woman is not supposed to learn how to write. Woman should be taught to read, but she shouldn't be taught how to write, वरना रुक्केबाजियां शुरू हो जाएगी. Oh Baba, how can they get the education in school when they cannot write? Meaning, is it possible to teach them and give them the education when they are not allowed to write? Even, meaning you cannot manage that in kindergarten. They will fail even in elementary school. They won't be able to pass the elementary school if they don't know how to write. Writing is essential. But even in this day and age, they have those Za'if ahadith, this hadith which is narrated on behalf of Prophet, that don't teach your woman Surah An-Nur, and also that चरखा काटने को क्या कहते हैं? Cotton spinning? Yeah. Teach your woman the cotton spinning and teach them the Surah An-Nur. But don't, and teach them to read. But don't teach them to write, and don't place them in the second story or the third story or above. Women should be never placed in those higher stories. They should be all on this first level. But second level is forbidden for women, because they can see men in the street. And this is whole one hadith of about 3 or 4 sentences. in these high rises and in these now the homes which all have 2-story and 3-story and 4-story homes, women are not allowed to go in the 2nd floor or in the 3rd floor or the 4th floor. They should be all on the 1st floor. So who made that hadith? First of all, this hadith is da'if. It doesn't have proper sanad. And then why do you discriminate this hadith? You take half of it and you reject the other half. You say women are not supposed to learn how to write. But you are putting your woman on the 2nd floor and 3rd floor and 5th floor, and you are not giving any fatwa even in these days that women are not, it is not allowed for women to go on the 2nd floor or 3rd floor. While this is part of the same hadith. So you know only half hadith and you neglect the other half hadith? No, that's not the point. So the issue is this hadith, this is not right. Islam is for education. Talabul ilm faridatun ala kulli Muslim. Acquiring the knowledge and education is a right and responsibility of every Muslim, male or female, doesn't make any difference. And then, as I said, for work or education, sometime it will become wajib on women to go out and work and do business and get into certain sectors in the society because society needs. Sometime it is mustahab, sometime it is mubah, it is okay. And in certain scenarios it is makruh, and in certain scenarios it is haram. You need to know those scenarios. You need to know where do you stand, what kind of work we are talking about, and what kind of individual you are. It depends on you, how strong you are, how practicing you are, how much you can resist, how much you can maintain your principles and your identity under the pressures or among the others. Then it will be decided whether it is jaiz for you or it is not jaiz for you, whether it is halal for you, whether it is haram for you. But our inspirations, our examples are Lady Khadijatul Kubra Salamullah Alayha, and then we see the Lady Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alayha, again continuing the same legacy. And then we come to the 3rd generation in Karbala, and we look at her granddaughter Hazrat Zainab Salamullah Alayha and Hazrat Kulsum Salamullah Alayha, and all the ladies of this household. These are the ladies of Islam, and this is the perspective of Ahlul Bayt. Our ladies, the ladies of Ahlul Bayt, were the ladies of knowledge. The ladies of Ahlul Bayt were the ladies of skills and talents. The ladies of Ahlul Bayt were the excellent households and housewives, but at the same time, our ladies were the best ladies to lead the community and to make the contribution in the social sector and in the academic center and in the business sectors even when they went out. Our ladies were the teachers, our ladies were the speakers, our ladies were the debaters, and our ladies were the ladies that who played all these different roles in the community and society. And this is the Shi'i perspective of women. Sometimes our own people, they get under influence of those weak ahadith of those Wahhabis and those Kishris and those people that who don't know what is meant by hadith, only stick with the words and don't even look to the sanad or to the riwayat or to the real meaning of the hadith. Shi'i madhab is not a boring or dry madhab, or a madhab which is only madhab of zahir. As we have zahir, we have batin. We have a madhab of wisdom. We have a madhab which has a philosophy. We have a madhab which has objectives. We have a balanced madhab. In modern times, the best example is Islamic Republic of Iran. Our women are now participating in elections, and they are getting elected in the parliament. They are pilots of aircrafts. They are doctors, they are nurses, they are in foreign office, they are in police, they are in army, they are in every sector. Even I think among the Muslim countries, Iran has more women in athletic areas and in sports. No other Muslim country, I believe, that has that many teams playing all those kind of games and sports as the Iranian woman is doing. But then you see them in masajid, you see them in the processions, you see them at the homes, you see them out in the society. So they are doing everything, and they are the most practicing ladies and practicing Islam and demonstrating the vision of Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wasalam. It's totally, it is totally different than that Talibani system in Afghanistan or in this FATA or Shumali Waziristan or whatever they want to promote in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or on that. Wahhabis and Sunnis, if really they are practicing Sunnis, they are not going to allow their women to even drive car. As it is, she is not allowed to drive the car in Saudi Arabia. But in Iran, they are pilots, they are flying aircrafts. So, working is perfectly okay and fine, and as I said, for some time it will be wajib for you to go to university and to go and outside and work and do your own business. Sometime it will be wajib. For some of you it is mustahab, for some of you it is makruh, for some of you definitely it is haram if you are a weak person. If you cannot take the heat, if you cannot resist to the peer pressure, and if you are a weak person that who is going to compromise your Islamic identity and Islamic ethics and Islamic rules and halal and haram and your Islamic duties, then it will become definitely haram for you. So nobody can say that Islam is against work or Islam is against education or Islam is against business. Islam is for all these things, but for the right reasons, right purpose, and in the right way. My main point which I was trying to make is that people need to realize and understand the difference of these two visions, the vision of Ahlul Bayt and the vision of these Khawarij, vision of these extremists, that they don't understand the real Islam, the wisdom of Islam, the philosophy of Islam. Even in this day and age, they want to live like as they are living in the times of cave, and they want to turn the clock back. And finally, what will happen? The whole world will be going to moon and Mirrikh and everywhere, and they will be all maintaining the lifestyle of Somalia and Afghanistan and Bangladesh and Pakistan. And then they will say that Islam is telling us this. But that is not the case. Inshallah, and when we will get into those nights of the Shahadat of Amirul Mu'mineen, I will bring from the teachings and the ahadith of Amirul Mu'mineen, where Amirul Mu'mineen tells you it is your duty to establish the society, establish the community, inhabitate it, improve it, establish it. We need to invent things. We Muslims need to invent, instead of totally depending on that tiny community in the world that who is going to invent the medicine and then we Muslims will use that medicine. We need to be also bringing something to the table. We need to be the leading community in science, in business, in IT, and in all these other areas of life. And then men and women, inshallah, both. So my brothers and sisters, One side we see women in tents, women only just limited to their homes, with no education, with no skills, with no talents. They cannot even go to the second floor or third floor of their home or in the hotel. And then the other vision is the vision of Ahlul Bayt, where you will have the business ladies like Hazrat Khadijatul Kubra, where you will have the ladies like Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alaiha, who is engaged in all these sectors of life. She worked outside, she traveled with the Prophet in the wars, she was teacher, and she was a political leader also. When they say politics is haram for women, she was a political leader also. She defended her husband and his right of Khilafat and Vilayat. And she became actually the spokesperson for Vilayat and for the Imamat of Amirul Mu'minin. Who was the spokesperson? That was the daughter of Prophet Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alaiha. She was the one that who became the spokesperson of Ali, because Ali couldn't afford, under the circumstances, to speak to everyone in that tone and in that way. Fatima comes on front. Fatima leaves the home. Fatima comes in the masjid and gives the khutbah. What was the masjid? At that time, it was the presidential, office. It was the president's office. It was open place, public place. She comes there and she speaks, she argues, she debates. And then according to our riwayat, for 6 months or for certain weeks, as much as according to different riwayat, whatever time she lived, she would go with Imam Ali door to door at the nights in the doors of Ansar, asking them to join Ali and support Ali. Who was doing that? Today you call lobbying or campaign. The campaign, people have the campaigns for the governments or their candidates. Who was doing the campaign? That was the daughter of Prophet Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alaiha. So we have our ladies not only sitting at home, but they are in streets and they are in neighborhood and going door to door for the right cause, with the right man, for the right purpose. And then you know that the wasiyat which she made before her shahadat, that wasiyat, that Ya Ali, when I die, don't make the announcement and don't tell anybody in the city that I died. Don't invite anyone in my janazah and don't bring anyone with me to my funeral session. Bury me in qabr and don't tell anybody that where I am buried. Don't you see that when any one of us is in those situations, we start calling everyone for du'a shifa and amma yujib and all those kind of requests, say that somebody is dying and somebody is sick and everybody in the world should know that somebody is sick and they want your dua and they want your du'a shifa and amma yujib. And then when somebody dies, there is a special effort, everybody should come in my procession, my janazah, majority of the people should come and participate in my janazah, and they should come and please you come and iltimas-e dua and iltimas-e dua and iltimas-e dua, and everybody should come in my janazah. And after my janazah, we send the email to the whole world for namaz-e washat and for Fatiha and for this and that, and everybody wants to see that people should come to my grave every Shab-e Jummah or every Jummah, and people should come to my grave and they should recite Fatiha for me. And here is Fatima Zahra Salamullah Alaiha saying, don't tell anybody that I am dying when I die, don't tell anybody that I died, don't bring anybody in my janazah, don't bring anybody to my grave, and don't tell anybody where I am buried. Why is Fatima doing that? Why is Fatima doing that? Fatima wants to leave a very strong statement that I was angry on the society of Medina and I boycotted the people of Medina and I don't like anyone of Medina to come and do this namaz-e-janaza at me and pray fakely on my grave and my qabr and participate in all that. And I want to be buried in a grave that nobody knows where I am buried. That it remains a statement until the day of judgment. People should ask why Fatima made that wasiyah. Why Fatima didn't allow people to come and participate in her funeral, and why she is buried in a grave which is unknown. That was the activism of Fatima. That was the activism of Fatima. Fatima made that statement, and very strong statement. So my brothers and sisters, our ladies were such ladies, wise, gifted, talented, leaders and stateswomen. And then from there, if you see the legacy of Fatima, legacy of Hazrat Khadijatul Kubra carried on with the daughter and the granddaughter, with Zainab Salamullah Alayha and with Kulsum. And really, I believe that the ruh of Fatima and the ruh of Khadija will be shad and pleased when they would see their daughter Zainab Salamullah Alayha carrying their legacy in Karbala. Fatima, when she was playing her role, she was still, her hands were free and she had the chadur. She was standing where the husband was still present. The sons were there and she was standing in Masjidun Nabi. It was a very muqaddas place. My brothers and sisters, but when when Zainab Salamullah Alayha comes, her hands are in chains. She doesn't have the scarf. She doesn't have the chadur. And she is standing in blood and cut pieces of her own sons and nephews and brothers. Maqtal, 72 के लाशों के अंदर ज़ैनब फातिमा की बेटी खड़ी, खदीजा की नवासी और फातिमा की बेटी कहां खड़ी? मक्तल के अंदर, जहां लाशों से भरा हुआ मक्तल, जहां हर तरफ खून ही खून है। और ज़ैनब वहां पे आके जब अपने भाई के लाशे को देखती तो एक मर्तबा ज़ैनब ऊंट से जमीन पे आ जाती और भाई के लाशे पे आके एक मर्तबा बोसा देना चाहा भाई की लाश को, और फिर बैन करके कहा कि भैया मैं आपके जिस्म के कौन से हिस्से पे बोसा दे सकूं, मैं जहां पे बोसा देना चाहती हूं मैं देखती हूं वही हिस्सा जख्मी, जख्मों से भरा हुआ है आपका लाशा और कोई जगह ऐसी नहीं है जहां पे ज़ैनब बोसा दे सके। और फिर नजदीक आके अपने भाई की लाश पे हाथ रखा और हिला के कहा, अंता अखी हुसैन, क्या आप ही हैं मेरे भाई हुसैन? क्या ज़ैनब पहचानने में गलती तो नहीं कर रही? क्या आप ही हैं हुसैन, मेरे भाई हुसैन, फातिमा के लाल हुसैन? और फिर पलट के एक मर्तबा मदीने की तरफ देखा और कहा, नाना आइए जरा देखिए अपनी गोद के पाले हुसैन को। नाना ये वही हुसैन है जिसको हाथों पे उठा के आप प्यार करते थे, जिसको आप अपने कंधों पे सवार करते थे, जिसको आप अपनी पुश्त पे सवार करते थे। आइए देखिए आज उसी हुसैन का लाशा। गर्दन कट चुकी है, जिस्म तीरों से छलनी है और घोड़ों के सुमों के नीचे और टापों के नीचे जिस्म नाज़नीन जो है वो पामाल हो चुका है। और ज़ैनब की बेकसी इस पे देखिए कि ज़ैनब अब रो रही हैं वहां पे कि एक मर्तबा किसी ने देखा 2 जवानों के लाशें पड़े हैं और उन लाशों पे कोई रोने वाला नहीं है। ہر شہید کے لاشے پہ کوئی نہ کوئی خاتون بیٹھی تھی جو گریہ کر رہی تھی، ماتم کر رہی تھی. 2 لاشیں ایسے تھے شاید جن پہ کوئی رونے والا نہیں تھا. کسی نے سوال کیا کیا یہ بچے یتیم ہیں؟ کیا ان بچوں کی کوئی ماں بہن یہاں موجود نہیں ہے کہ جو ان پہ روئے؟ ایک مرتبہ سننا تھا. کوکھ جلی نے کہا نہیں، یہ یتیم تو نہیں ہیں، یہ میں زینب کے شہزادے اون و محمد ہیں. لیکن زینب کس کس کو روئے؟ بھیا حسین کی لاش پہ آ کے روئے، اپنے علی اکبر کو روئے، اپنے علی اصغر کو روئے، اپنے قاسم کے لاشے پہ روئے، یا جا کے اون و محمد کی لاش پہ. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.